and talk to Brian Christopherson. BC, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. I stuttered on your last name. Christopherson's not very tough to say either.
I mean, it's not Smith or Jones, so I'll give you a break. You got to you ultimately pronounced it right. Usually I'm Christopherson when I'm called in a line at a food place, and that's fine.
Hey, when you were filling out the bubbles on a standardized test, did you always punch or punch yourself in the side of the head and be like, Mom and Dad, like, why was my last name Christopherson? I mean, that's a lot of bubbles to fill out.
Yeah, it is. Actually, I think on some of them it would run out, and I was just Brian Christophers, and so
they wouldn't let you just be Brian C.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't. So that probably explains why they mailed me some lower test scores. I probably actually scored higher, but they had the wrong name. That's
where you're laying your head.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, somebody that doesn't have an issue with standardized test, bubbling, I guess, filling out his last name is Kyle McCord. And that name has recently emerged as possibly the new Husker favorite in the portal. BC, would you agree with that?
I don't know yet. Maybe. I think that there's interest from both sides at this point, but Kyle McCord is someone who probably has a few parties after him. So you got to keep that in mind. But definitely, why would you not kick the tires on that one? He played it in one of the most high-profile positions in college sports this last year, let's be honest, as Ohio State's quarterback. A lot of pressure. He didn't have a great offensive line for Ohio State standards, make that clear. That's what their writers will tell you. Not their best O-line that they've had, and he worked behind that and had pretty good numbers, as you would expect with the weapons around him and the team as they are. And he's kind of, as one of the writers said up there to us, sort of the scapegoat for the Michigan game, because somebody's got to be to blame. So it's Ryan Day and him, I guess. I wouldn't, having watched that one from start to finish, as you guys probably did, I wouldn't say that. I just think he's a guy who has been through the battles and could stand up tall and answer the questions around here and deal with being in this bubble, because he's already done it times 5 probably at Ohio State. So I like that one, but I like some of the other guys they visited too. I mean, I think Levitt's an interesting young player who can move around really well. Kept his red shirt on last year. Anybody who interviewed him this week in our little neck of the woods can tell you he's a supremely confident kid in what he can get done. And, obviously Shapen and Will Howard's got a lot of experience. So I think they're going after the right guys, and you just don't know exactly how they rank them.
BC, I'm going to hit you with something here, and I want you to wait before you jump to the answer, because I said this to Connor earlier in the show, and I want to ask you this too, because I think the number one question that this team should be asking first is, who gets you excited to watch Nebraska football next year? Like, that has to be number one, at least when you're in terms of talking about quarterbacks. That is the question you have to first answer. Who gets you excited? And then you have to fall into, okay, these are my guys that get me excited. Now who's a fit? Because you brought up Sam Levitt's name, and yes, Sam Levitt's a good player. He's got good mobility. He's got good toughness, but he's not a name that just gets me excited to watch football next year. Like, Kyle McCord is a name. DJU is a name. Will Howard is a name. How important do you think it is to first get somebody that gets you excited to watch football next year?
I get your point, Andrew, because right now I do think there's sort of this like, oh, we've been through the same old thing 7 years in a row. I know it was just your first year, but man, we've been doing this dance a long time, and we need some jolt into our veins. And a quarterback who's been through it in more of a high-profile role probably helps in these next 3 to 4 months, right? Like, in how we're talking about the team and all that stuff. I do think, even if it's a younger guy like a Levitt, I think over the course of time, when we get to spring, if you have like Levitt and I'm just throwing hypotheticals out here right now. But if you have like Levitt and Purdy, for instance, like battling it out, I think people will look up an intrigue and be like, okay, how far has Purdy come along? I want to learn more about this Levitt guy. So I think as interest will grow as we get to this season, and ultimately it's just going to come down to those first games in, September, when you open up and then you play Colorado the second week. Do you have somebody out there who doesn't turn it over 4 times, and if that person, whatever his name is, if he goes out there and looks solid and has good vision in the passing game, exhibits a little bit more clutch gene than we've seen, that'll immediately have people watching with intrigue all season. So I think your point is one to consider, though. But I still think at the end of the day, it's got to be best fit that you think can win, and that's the end of the story.
So we looked at earlier, 5 of the top 7 QBs in the portal as of this moment remain uncommitted. Looking at names like Cam Ward, DJU, Dylan Gabriel, are there any big names that you've seen in this portal right now that Nebraska has not reached out to that you feel like we should be, trying to get in contact with?
I think like Cam Ward, for instance, I'd knock on his door and see what the situation's like, and make your case. Why not? I think all those guys you mentioned would be possibilities that you would want to look at. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. We've sort of been keeping it to the guys we think they've talked to or are going to. But yeah, I think it should be like you're looking at every angle down every alleyway for quarterbacks, and that's not just those high profile guys you're talking about. I'm talking about, like, is there somebody in FCS that you think has the special stuff, that could be considered here? So all that should be on the table to me. I do think the 4 names that have been mentioned the most are legitimate candidates right now. And so I probably operate, it's a great question you asked, but I think operate more just from the reporter angle of like, who do I think is in the running right now? What's the information we have that makes this person valid for the conversation? But certainly if any of those guys popped in the radar in the next day or so and you start to hear their name, people are going to lose their minds around here. And that would answer Andrew's question previously. If you had Cam Ward walking up,
gets the people
I'd
going.
be cool with it, man. I'd be cool
to do a spring press conference. I think people will be kind of fired up.
And now, BC, I was talking with one of our listeners yesterday, and it had me thinking about this question because I have seen people on both sides of the fence here. You look at what the Huskers have on their roster, and then you peek inside the portal outside of the quarterback position, specifically at the linebacker spot, because you lose Reimer and you lose Henrich. Do you think it's necessary for the Huskers to make moves away from that quarterback spot with the young talent that's emerging in position groups that saw some turnover, like the linebacker spot? Because you see Kane Williams a little bit this season. Dylan Rogers was a 2023 commit. Eric Fields is that unknown he's kind of the guy that everybody can't wait to see. All got crazy good reviews from the staff this offseason, and they couldn't stop talking about the depth that they had. So back to the question, do you think it's necessary to make a move to fill that spot now, or do you just trust what the young guys have?
I think it's possible to make a move there. The positions I've always named off are quarterback, a wide receiver, if you could add a veteran wide receiver to the crew. Running back, although I think, Rule has said they want to get a running back, but that could be a recruit still. Maybe they got someone, kind of hidden now that they're thinking about. And on that end, running back is a spot, I do believe, real quick, where you can go into the high school ranks. And while it didn't happen last year with Quentin Ives, you can sometimes find somebody who their first year can help you out, at that position, it seems like. I don't know why, although some people would push back on that, say there's so much to process with the pass blocking now and all that. But I do think running back could come from either spot. But linebacker, I would agree with you. It wouldn't be horrible by any means to have a veteran guy who has a proven resume if you feel like he really fits and would gels with your staff and would fit into what Tony White wants to do that you could put out there, because that is going to be a question to answer for them in the offseason. I think Mekhi Bayer is a guy you're going to see his role just increase as he goes through this program, and he'll probably have even more snaps next year. But yeah, that's the one defensive position I really look at as a spot that could be a portal possibility.
So when you mention looking for a nice transfer running back, do you think getting a Will Howard, do you think Trayshawn Ward would be interested in joining him at Nebraska as well? Do you think that could be used as kind of a recruiting pitch?
But you never know. Sometimes that does have. We saw last year, right? I mean, with certain schools where there's like 2 or 3 guys come from one program, and I don't know those all because this guy, when I'm going to, it might have just worked out that that's where the connections were, especially with Georgia last year, and they had one with Florida. But I think that always helps. We see it in recruiting sometimes where a teammate will follow, and so could be a possibility there. Running back, they need one more guy, though. I don't like whoever that is, whether it's portal guy or recruit guy. I really feel like you need to bolster what you have, because I really hope Ramir and Gabe track all the way back. Those guys have been through it in their careers, and we never have really gotten the chance to see what Gabe Irvin can fully do, which is unfortunate. So I hope we get that opportunity. But am I nervous about it a little bit just because of the severity of both injuries, and there's a lot riding on them being healthy? Yeah. And that's why, I liked what Emmett did, but they got to find someone really special at that running back. You guys can remember back when Amir was here, and you had that back who there were certain games where I would write stories where, the O-line played really well, like against Miami in 2014. Go watch that game back and see like 130 yards or Amir Abdullah just being special. And I think we can't lose sight of what that can mean to have a running back like that. If you can find them, which everybody's trying to find, because it's not easy to find that separator at that position, but man, it would make a big difference.
BC, going back to my previous point, because I'm actually on the side of the fence that I don't think it's necessary defensively, especially to get somebody out of the portal, to maybe have a young guy in instead who has been getting some good reviews from the staff in the offseason. My question to you is this, and I know it's way too early to really be asking this question, but I think it's fun to at least think about right now. Who's your pick from the 2023 class to have a breakout 2025 campaign?
25
just next
20,
season.
Yeah, 24 to 25.
To 25.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Let's save a year.
Okay. I'll say I think Dwight Boodle, when he gets healthy, he's going to have a say in the back end. I think they really like him. Dylan Rogers comes up every flipping time.
Rule telling you
about
great last name.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I mean, Dylan Rogers is definitely going to be a guy to watch. I think I still kind of gravitate toward that defensive line. They got so many young, good guys that I really like. We saw Van Poppel, so I don't know if that counts. Maybe that's cheating. I think Van Poppel is going to be a dude next year. Like, I'm not like all conference dude, but I just think he's going to be really good. He's going to take snaps away from people, and he's going to elevate and be that kind of player. So those are the guys that pop up to me. And then the ones we've already seen, like, protect what's yours. That's why it's, Rule said you got to value your own roster. You especially got to do that with a guy like Prince Will. You got, like, I'm not saying anything's happening there, but you've heard Rule talk about in this day and age, there's people trying to get into what's yours and all that stuff. You better make sure those guys, how much they're appreciated and how much they matter around here too. And I think that's going to be easy in this December, because this is not going to be a crazy portal offseason. The numbers are such that they can only take, like, honestly, 3 to 4 guys probably. And so most of the guys on the roster understand, like, it is on me to develop, and they're trusting me to do that. And so I think that's going to help keep some of the vultures away, I guess.
So how does the return of Nash, Hutmacher, and Ty Robinson, how does that bolster that development for some of these young guys that you've just mentioned? How important is that veteran leadership?
Oh, I mean, it's so large. Like to in football to have those two big dudes on the D line, it just changes everything for your defensive scheme and how you
They're
can
so
operate.
good.
I mean, I really do understand what they're saying where when it was explained why he was coming back, it was said, he didn't get the full off season last year. And if you watched him play, he did gain speed, right? I mean, like you saw like in the last half of the season, he was a different guy even in the first half. He was starting to pop up and just make more of those just game changing plays we've always wanted from him. And so I think there's a belief that's just the start of that. And let's just feed that for one more year and see where you get picked. But yeah, those guys are going to set the tone for this is how we do things around here. And it's going to be a high bar that other guys are going to want to reach. And the good thing is they've got really mature freshmen or were freshmen in that room that I think want to learn. Like I feel like Cam Lenhart's a guy who he's smart. He immediately buddied up to the old guys and he's thought of as an old guy already. So I think that's going to work out very well for them. And then, there's Jamari Butler, like basically in that same room now. He plays D-line more than anything. And guys who have paid their dues, and they can also probably preach a little bit of patience to some of these guys, which is good too. Because Jamari Butler, who was actually in the portal for 24 hours last year, if people remember, is like the perfect guy for anybody that's considering anything to have a conversation with.
BC, can I ask you something about the Creighton, Nebraska basketball game this past weekend?
If we must, yes.
Because I kept hearing this may be one of those games you don't look at to revisit mistakes, just toss it out, that it's not worth the time. Now, to some degree, I agree with that logic. You just have to admit things could have just not gone your way that night. But the game plan was good. So yeah, toss it out the window. But did you see it that way? Or did the game have you walking away saying, yeah, that was a tough loss, but here's what we learned?
I still, I walked away feeling like the last games, the 2 or 3 games before it, where I thought the defensive edge that they were looking to establish was still floating in the air and not grabbed yet. And I understand Creighton can make a lot of teams look like they're playing bad defensively because they hit shots, and they did hit some tough shots. I thought at times Nebraska gave Shireman, made it way too easy for him, when he got in a rhythm, especially in the first half. And so I think there's some things you would want to revisit there. It wasn't a game that set off alarm bells to me, like, oh, these guys stink or whatever, like let's just move on. And there is some of that unfortunately goes. I said it that way because you guys know that there's the casual fan who they're like, oh, I hear Nebraska's 7-0. I'll check it out, and so it's Nebraska Creighton, and this is the game and it's kind of viewed in that same prism as football, right? Where it's like there's so much on this one game, and then it doesn't go well, and there's an overreaction to it. And I think that's really when you hear the stuff you're hearing this week as they get ready for Minnesota tonight, which I'm about to get in the car and go to. I feel like that's the point is like, guys, it was a bad day. They're a great team. We know it. They could be an Elite 8 team again or something like that. We got to go handle our business Wednesday. Let's put our attention right there. And if Nebraska wins tonight, and it's a big one, there'll be a jolt back in the step. There will, because they'll be 1-0 in the league, and people will be like, okay, Creighton's really good. We got it. They smoked them this year, but they'll be 1-0, and then Michigan State's coming Sunday. That's going to be a tough one, man. Michigan State just lost to Wisconsin, and they're 4-4, and I know how Izzo's teams are like after that. So
right,
that's not a great setup for Nebraska. They need this one big time tonight.
One more thing here, as you mentioned, you're going up to Minnesota. What do you think is if you could give your keys to the game, what would be your 3 keys for Nebraska to get that win?
They got to get back first off on the glass again, where they early on they were just, they're playing lesser teams, but it's like not even a contest. And the last few games, it's been tough rebounding. They lost by 11 to Creighton in that statistic too. So this is going to be maybe of a fair fight tonight, and they got to win. They got to win the boards fight, the 50-50 balls. They're going to have somebody besides Casey hit from the outside. Like CJ Wilcher, when he pops in, I don't think he's their best defensive guy. He's got to bring it on the offensive end. He's got to hit 3 shots, those big shots that when you need them. Rink Mass is going to have a better game shooting it. After the game, McDermott said an interesting thing. He said they shot, they got a lot of threes up. He's speaking of Nebraska, but they were the guys we wanted taking them, shooting them. And if you look at the stat sheet, Alex shoots like 4 or 5.
Right.
Mass shoots 5. I think Hoiberg believes Mass can hit those shots, but Rink's gotta be a pretty good 3-point shooter, and it's got to come out in games like this where he hits at least 1 or 2 that keeps him honest. So that's going to be a big deal too.
Well, also you have to think, how many games is Nebraska going to play this year against a team that shoots as much as Creighton does? Maybe never until the end of the year.
Creighton is really good. I mean, they are. They are.
Well, they're good when they make their shots. When they miss,
well, they
really
had a game like Nebraska, against Colorado State. They had that game. That was the game they had against Colorado State where they lost by 21. Was just like Nebraska last year. As McDermott said, they shot 43s last year. They only hit 10, and they couldn't, throw it in the ocean from the beach in that game. So once in a while they'll have a bad day at the office, but they're better defensively this year. That's what makes them tough. They're
strong.
So, yeah.
BC, really appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much. Safe trip.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
It's Brian Christopherson, senior writer at Husker 24/7. Always appreciate his time on a Wednesday. Okay, when we come back, we will talk to a local guy here in town. Here in Omaha, I should say, because BC's up in Lincoln. Talk to Andy Kendi over at KETV. He is the sports director. We do it every other Wednesday. We flip-flop him and the sports director up in Lincoln. Andy Kendi, AK, coming your way next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back.